Hi, everyone. Sean Wallman with CS Cyber. I'm Sean.
I'm Chad.
And that makes the CS piece. And today we've got a couple different topics to discuss. One was a big one in the news recently, the KnowBe4 North Korean hacker hire.
Yeah, that was a crazy story.
Yeah, that was interesting. And then we'll talk a little bit more about CrowdStrike and kind of what's going on there, because that's going to be an evolving story that's going to just keep on going. Yeah. So let's get right into it. So KnowBe4 has disclosed that they hired a North Korean hacker. And, we know that there's a lot of that stuff going on. We know that North Korea, funds themselves a lot on kind of this process, as well as malware, just kind of deploying ransomware. But what were some of your takes on the KnowBe4 piece?
Well, I mean, the story in itself just kind of blew me away. The fact that, this happened at KnowBe4 was really a test of their own controls, right? And everything they preach. So right. I kind of looked at it from, the North Korean point of view. And I'm like, something that took this long to kind of manifest and get into was really fumbled at the goal line, in my opinion. I mean,
right.
They were right there.
But I think it kind of looked like a miscommunication or a breakdown of communication, almost like the telephone game. As things continue to evolve and you pass the information farther down the stream, information can be misinterpreted or you could have wrong instructions. So I think in this case, I think maybe like you said, we were talking earlier, they just may not have known what they had.
Yeah, that was kind of my take on it. I mean, I think, the laptop probably got passed around, it probably got plugged in, and they just started their normal process, and, the hackers really didn't understand what they had. I think KnowBe4 really dodged a bullet here because, I mean, I kind of think of if they hadn't have installed the malware and this guy would have just hung around, right. How many guys are like that out there already?
Yeah.
That, are just kind of listening on the wire and acting as if, yeah, this is just kind of normal everyday stuff, but it's all going to North Korea, China. That's really interesting, I think.
Yeah, and normally, which is another odd piece of this, normally these North Korean hackers that come in and act as U.S. employees, usually their job is to gain a paycheck over time. And then they take a large portion of that check and give it to the DPRK. So yeah, another instance of, in this case, that malware was deployed very quickly.
Right.
And I mean, I don't even think they would have had time, to pay the person. But that's usually the case. That's usually the case is that they're after money.
And that really makes me think that they just didn't realize what they had there. They didn't realize where this laptop came from.
Yeah.
So,
no, I think so. It was a Mac, to my understanding, that had a undisclosed EDR software on it, and purportedly the story says that the SOC team responded in a good amount of time. But let's talk about the controls that maybe KnowBe4 missed, or controls that we know they missed. This was an AI position, a developer AI position. We certainly know that at this point, deep fakes and all those types of things are well evolving and are scary at times. So I guess in this particular case, there was no in-person interview.
Right.
And, I think this is something that businesses across the world are going to have to consider when they're doing remote hires, that they may have to work in, a physical interview.
Right.
And even if you don't fly the person back to your corporate headquarters, as long as, you can find somebody that represents your organization in the geographic region that person is interviewing, right?
Yeah, it could be a trusted third party that does that for you.
It could be, until the trusted third party is compromised.
That's true.
But yeah, I mean, I hate to say it like this, but if I believe, which may or may not be, a real request, I think it could be, but I think companies getting back to the roots of how this is all supposed to work in the first place physical interviews. You fly the person in, you meet them. In this particular case, I believe, maybe only one credential was checked instead of multiple credentials. Definitely a huge red flag where the person's shipping address was different than the address they lived at.
Right.
So that's a really big red flag. But we may have to do that. We may have to, the whole remote work thing, has worked pretty well, and definitely something that we learned during COVID. But what do you think? I mean, I think maybe, getting back to a lot of the just normal business stuff that we did prior to COVID may have to come back.
Yeah, I mean, I think you definitely have to see someone in person or, have someone else verify an identity. I think as we get into deep fakes, I mean, that's really tough if you're just doing remote interviews. I mean, clearly, right? So I would say KnowBe4 is probably going to put out some training on deep fakes and AI and maybe some lessons learned from, their incident here. But yeah, it was just a really interesting.
Yeah, it was interesting. I don't understand the deploying of the malware immediately. Because that disregarded the whole point of getting a paycheck.
Yeah, but I mean, kudos to their IT and SOC team, right? I mean, I would say those processes worked as designed. They identified it, they quarantined it, they took action. So
yeah, absolutely. Cool. All right, well, let's move on to CrowdStrike. So that continues to evolve and will continue to evolve over time. So CrowdStrike says that a buggy test software is responsible for faulty update. So let me clarify what that means. Buggy test software was at fault for discovering the bug.
Yeah,
right.
Say that again three times.
So, right. So the bug didn't detect the bug. So there, there's a lot of lessons learned to this. There's been a lot of education over the last couple weeks of CrowdStrike explaining kind of their update process, which was a little bit different, I think, than people were describing, and even may have been a little bit different than how we described it on our show. So apparently this was, what they call rapid response updates. And these are very fast updates that occur in order to keep up with evolving threats. So so far, it looks like it's done billions of dollars in damage. That's for sure. We do know that. But this is this just comes down to software QC issues.
Yeah, it really did. I mean, it was just a miss there, but the impacts were pretty widespread, and I think they've been interesting to follow. Right? I mean, it's just everyone kind of knows how the internet is connected and it's interdependent on certain things, but like something like this, a third party EDR solution to have that much of an impact on the internet in a whole, right? I mean, Delta. I mean, that was. Are they? I don't even know if they're still down or if they're still recovering.
Yeah, they're still recovering. I still don't. I mean, we're taping this on July 30th, and I think they're still having issues.
Yeah.
I think an unfortunate byproduct of this is I think companies. We know for a fact that companies at this point, even prior to the CrowdStrike incident, were already hesitant on rapid updates, like getting updates done quicker. This is going to now, make organizations rethink something that we already wanted them to rethink and pick it up.
Right.
We still see a lot of vulnerabilities or a lot of compromises out there that are due to updates that are years old, right?
Yep.
So organizations that are not only weeks or months behind, but years behind. So that's an unfortunate byproduct. Is that's going to make people more trigger happy in regards to just delaying their update system. I think there's going to be a lot of pushback from boards and governing bodies and investors who are going to say, look, you got to slow down the updates. You got to. So that's just what I think is something that's going to come out of this.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of potential downstream impact there, right? I mean, if the updates aren't being applied like in almost real time, I mean, you're almost behind, right? I mean, you have to do that to maintain a security posture.
Right.
But when stuff like this happens, it makes everybody take a step back and just be like, oh, maybe we should, rethink this, do something a little bit different, but still got to have EDR.
Yeah, you do. Hopefully this doesn't, make people get rid of EDR. A lot of people that have EDR installed properly know that it's finicky. It's not like antivirus. We could probably film a whole episode on just nothing but what EDR does. That antivirus doesn't. It's taken a long time. We've had it for over 5 years in our platform, and it's challenging. But one thing I wanted to talk about with the CrowdStrike piece is how much information that I've seen so far that if you would have, being able to see what that update was going to do was noticeable within minutes of a device blue screening, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the questions I have, which is rhetorical, obviously, is, are we relying too much on automated testing of software? And if somebody at CrowdStrike would have just taken a second and loaded that, or just watched their own computer, right? Like just updated their own systems internally, they would have seen pretty fast, right? That the update was bad. So that's something that I've noticed too, just so far in the reports, is the dependency on automated testing.
Right, and the trust in vendors just to get it right?
Yeah,
you can do some testing downstream as well. I know a lot of people do that with Microsoft patching, so.
Right. Well,
but that's tough. That's a whole nother episode as well.
Yeah, we were talking too before the show about how I keep saying, I've said it a couple times on this show, and I've probably said it on other stuff too, but the bigger they are, the harder they fall. And I don't mean any type of I'm not pushing on CrowdStrike. I said from the very beginning, we're not in a glass house throwing rocks. So it could very easily have happened to us. It could have happened to Microsoft. It's happened to other antivirus companies. There was I think back in like 2009 or 2010, there was a big McAfee issue that shut down, browsers and all kinds of stuff. I think it flagged a core Windows component. But I guess my point is, to your point, that just the trust in larger companies, right? That, well, they're bigger, they've got the resources, they have the people. I think those things are all true, but it just means that also whatever might happen to them could be a lot bigger too. So
they're not invincible.
No, they're not. They're not. And you can armchair quarterback this whole thing like everybody is doing. I watched an episode not too long ago about, he was an attorney, guy that I follow on YouTube, and he was talking about the master service agreement and how, potentially none of these companies that are going to sue CrowdStrike are going to get anything out of it because of the limit of liability that they built in.
Right.
And that's just one guy's opinion, right? I mean, I haven't, I'm not an attorney, and neither are you. But there's a lot of interesting things that are coming out of this with the size of organization that CrowdStrike is.
Right. But that whole thing, that like what you touched on there, that's a whole interesting discussion to me about how people sue and, what the liability is here. Because, it could have just have easily gone the other way, right? Microsoft could have changed something that caused CrowdStrike to quarantine it, and the same thing could have happened, right? So, well, there's things on both sides of that, I think. But. And
the Microsoft thing, that has happened.
Right.
So Microsoft has issued updates in the past that have, brick domain controllers, and they've done all kinds of catastrophic damage to organizations. But, I think that's just something that people accept and go, oh, well, that was Microsoft, they put out a bad update.
Right.
But man, CrowdStrike puts out an update and, shuts down 8.5 million devices globally, grounds all air traffic. A little more catastrophic than that, right? Than just a brick domain controller.
Right.
But it certainly does call into account, making these organizations accountable for sure, not putting too much trust in them. We've talked many times about third and fourth party management stuff. So this is at the core, definitely a vendor management conversation.
Yeah. But really, two really interesting stories this week.
Yeah, they were very interesting. So we'll continue to follow those and let you guys know if anything changes. All right. Well, that's it for this episode. Thank you for viewing and thank you for listening to our podcast. We'll continue to pick out stories and kind of dive into a little bit more detail as things evolve. But for right now, thank you for viewing and have a great day. We'll see you on the next one.
See you next time.